Shares of Salesforce rising more than 3% today as investors cheer mass layoffs. The software company cutting around 8,000 jobs or 10% in the latest headcount cut in the tech sector. Said CEO Mark Benioff, quote, "The environment remains challenging and our customers are taking a more measured approach to their purchasing decisions." Salesforce, like many tech companies, boomed during the pandemic with people hunkering down at home. With the soaring revenues came similar headcount, growing from about 48,000 to just under 80,000 at the end of October. That's an increase of more than 30%, Seana. It is not the beginning of tech layoffs. It appears to be far from the end.
It certainly does. And I thought it was interesting, Benioff really just taking responsibility for this, for the fact that Salesforce grew way too quickly. He wrote part in that letter that you just wrote that we hired too many people leading into this economic downturn we're facing, and I take responsibility for that. And I think this is largely reflective of the trends that we're seeing more broadly throughout the industry rather than this being a Salesforce specific issue. Because when you take into account the fact that clients have been starting to scale back some of their spending, a lot of that being done in the enterprise space, which clearly affects Salesforce, and more reflective of the softening that we're seeing more so in the landscape rather than Salesforce losing some of that ground or losing market share to some of its competitors. The stock, Dave, has been hammered over the past year, shares off nearly 50%. I think many on the street were maybe not expecting, but weren't necessarily going to be surprised if Salesforce was in fact forced to lay off people, given the fact that they scaled so quickly. But that 10% number might have been a little bit higher than what some analysts were initially expecting to see.
I think it most similarly follows the Amazon story, in that another tech company that just really overbuilt during the pandemic and had to cut back under Andy Jassy. A little different than the Meta story, which invested too heavily in, of course, the metaverse. If there's any sprinkling of good news, 5 months of severance and benefits for those employees. And a ZipRecruiter survey recently found that 79% of tech employees who were laid off found a new job in the next 3 months. Now, the question is, Seana, and I think the question that Jay Powell is asking is, are those new jobs going to be at the same salary or lower and bring down inflation increases? That's what he needs, the wage inflation to begin to come down.
Well, at least at this point, it seems like the employee still has the upper hand. Obviously, it varies from industry to industry, but as these layoffs tend to increase, or if it keeps on the trend that we have been seeing, then the employer will have the upper hand, and maybe we will see salaries begin to come down a bit, and simply people aren't able to negotiate maybe for the salary that they want at their next job.